Startup Grind and Derek, thank you once again for hosting us. This is awesome. This year, I wanted to talk about deep tech because we have two of the OGs in the house here. Tim has been investing for 40 years, and even if we exclude SpaceX, Tesla, Cruise, in the last 10 years, 50% plus of your investments have been deep tech. And Danielle built the Thiel Fellowship. Needs no introduction, right? And now she's founder and partner of 1517 Fund, in case you don't know. They're backing renegade scientists and dropouts, and they're, again, funding some of the most futuristic ideas out there. So I'll just start with how have the barriers to entry in deep tech come down, do you think, in your opinion? Danielle, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, first off, great to be here. Great to be with you, Tim. Great to be with you, Sufyan. What we've noticed in the barriers coming down as far as deep tech, I mean, some of it is access to resources and information. Some of it is funding. I'm seeing more and more over time how access to that capital pushes people to do things on the cutting edge in a way that they wouldn't before. When we started 1517, 9 years ago, we started making early stage deep tech investments as one of our thesis areas, but there weren't that many players in the space. And now over time, as we see investors becoming more comfortable with that, I think it gives founders the opportunity to think bigger than maybe they would have originally.
Yeah, I think the reason I back a lot of deep tech is I'm looking for the outlier. I'm looking for that entrepreneur who's a little bit on the edge and coming at an existing old lazy industry in a new way, and so I've never really felt like there was a high barrier to entry. In fact, I always felt like it was pretty easy to fund them because no one else was willing to do it, and so I would always find that that odd, strange case, and mostly because when we funded Tesla and SpaceX and whatever, those were nutty investments. They were way off the scope. Everybody was doing like enterprise software, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and says, "Oh, we're going to launch rockets," or, we're going to create an electric car, or we're going to, whatever the Skype was deep tech at the time. I think you just. I'm looking for those entrepreneurs who are sort of taking this interesting technology and applying it to an industry that has gotten lazy and bureaucratic. And, okay, just think of a few. Lazy bureaucratic industries with, that are providing bad service at a high cost. Okay? Healthcare, banking, insurance, government. Those are some industries I'm going to be going after. Defense. And I think all of those are really good for deep tech right now. And we're looking for really interesting companies. So I hope some of you out there are deep tech entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are coming after something in a new, crazy way.
Okay, awesome. So you picked some verticals that's top of mind for you. You've both also started these incredible programs for founders. Danielle, do you want to touch base on some of the programs you have?
Sure, touch base on a couple of things. So I was on the founding team of the Thiel Fellowship, which was started 14 years ago. As most here know, that is a grant program that gives young people $100,000 to work on science and tech projects and companies outside of university. It was very controversial when we started that program. It was very sacrilegious to think that a young person might do something other than going to college. And then with 1517 now, this is our venture fund. What we saw was that we had a hard time finding investors. There aren't many people like Tim out there who are willing to take that moment to meet with someone who's really cutting edge, doing something, who might seem a little crazy on the surface, but we at 1517 we say we look for that line of crazy and crazy awesome. Of this person might be really interesting in many dimensions. So we started 1517 to scale our work at the Teal Fellowship, and actually we just launched a new program that we've called the Flux Capacitor, as a homage to Back to the Future, looking at renegade scientists who might not otherwise get a shot to be in industry by taking a leap and getting a $100,000 investment check through our fund to work on some cutting edge work. And one thing that I think is just, I've been thinking a lot deeply about is that, age of first start to major innovations is often, I think, younger than we think about. I was just listening to a podcast about Heisenberg, and he was 23 when he came up with the uncertainty principle. Amelia Earhart was in her early 20s. I am certain on that one. And Amelia Earhart was in her early 20s when she was the first woman to reach the highest altitude. So I don't think we give enough credence to young people building things, and what we're seeing now is a really interesting intersection of deep tech dropout founders who are building in really interesting spaces.
No, that's an amazing program. I'll come back and double click on some learnings from that program because you just branded it. But Tim, you started a similar program.
Yeah,
Draper
it's a little different. We started Draper University of Heroes, and it's an entrepreneurial school, which is sort of a weird thing because most entrepreneurs are, breaking out of school and, don't put me in this cage and let me go. And the whole first week is on future. So we're all trying to figure out what does that future look like? And we're anticipating the future. We go through a hero-a-thon and try to create a future that we want to see happen. And each entrepreneur does this. They say, what do you want to? What's wrong with the world? How are you going to change it? How are you going to make money changing it? Or how are you going to create a product or service that changes it? How do you make money with that? And then how do you distribute that product around the world? Because if you're not making money and you're not distributing a product around the world, you're not doing anybody any favors. So we have that as our general goal. And I'm looking for those outliers. I'm looking for those heroes. A couple of them are in the audience here. We got 4,000 graduates now.
Yeah.
Hands up.
Oh, nice.
First line of the pledge.
There you go.
Boom! I will promote freedom at all costs.
Wow.
And then the one that everybody remembers. Oh, you're going to the next one. But no, I will fail and fail again until I succeed. So that's a great message for an entrepreneur because in school you're told never do anything wrong. Like all I want you to do is memorize this. You get an A if you don't make any mistakes. And we're looking and we're saying, I don't know, the mistakes are the cool part of life. Mistakes are like penicillin was moldy bread. The electricity was a guy flying a kite. America was somebody looking for the West Indies. Isn't that West India? India, anyway.
It is the West Indies.
Yeah, and Reese's Peanut Butter Cup was two people. One had chocolate, one had peanut butter, and they collided. So these mistakes are the great inventions of tomorrow. So we encourage trial and failure and trial and error and trial and success.
Okay, that's a great segue into my next question, which is around fundraising, because we meet entrepreneurs at the earliest stage, right? We're either indoctrinating them with future tech or they're very early in their journeys. And Danielle, you mentioned your first check is $100,000. Our fund, Draper U Ventures, also does $100,000. The most common question I get asked is, how is that enough money to start a deep tech company? Takes millions. So what have you both seen from your experiences funding companies?
Yeah, we've seen some really amazing outcomes starting with small amounts of money. And in fact, we actually also have a grant program at 1517 where we'll give a young person $1,000. Used to be a Venmo payment before we got kicked off the platform. And no equity, just getting people started. And what we think about with capital is that scaffolded over time. And so with our $100,000 investment program, we will meet some founders who have an idea, and it seems really interesting. A team of ours that some of you may have heard about now is Power. They are making a new battery, and they're slated to be both in space and in the sea in short order. They're a team of about, I think, 50, 60 people at this point, but we started them many years ago as actually a 50K check in 1517. It was 2 undergrads at Vanderbilt who had sort of dusted off some old research off the shelf and said, hey, we think that it's time to look at this again. And so we asked them what could they do with 50K, and they gave us some ideas, and they started building, and then we scaffold our checks from there. So as the company matured, we continued to put in more money and, of course, connected them to more investors. And one nice thing about working in deep tech is there's also lots of non-dilutive funding out there as well for people. And that combination of venture capital and non-dilutive funding in industry makes for a powerful combination. So for us, it is often looking at, what can you get started with? Can you start developing a proof of concept and going from there?
Tim?
So at Draper University, it's usually a 5-week program where it's hero training for 5 weeks, and then it's 5 weeks of go. And what is go? Well, it's go. Just go do it. And a little mentorship and some other things, but mostly it's just go. So I actually think that that free time is more important to an entrepreneur than an amount of money to get it going. I mean, you might need a little money if it's a hardware thing and you got to put together a prototype or whatever, but it's still a very low amount of money. Giving them sort of 5 weeks to just go is like magic to them. And all sorts of things can happen. So the amount of money is not that important as for when a company is just getting started. It's more like, okay, can I get enough to just try this thing and see if it works and see if there's a customer out there who'll buy it, and do a few of these things so that it's a way of, like, as an entrepreneur, you just have to dive in. But it's a way of diving in and having a little bit of freedom so that you're not completely left out in the dark. And I think that's great. And then as things grow, as soon as you get that, in fact, I think the money should be very low while you're in development. But when you have that product market fit, that's when you want to raise a lot of money so you've figured out. You got 3 happy customers. You figured it out. Here's product market fit. Now you put the accelerator down and you raise money, bigger amounts of money.
One thing at 1517 that we talk about that Tim touched on so nicely is actually that go time mentality. And what we talk about a lot is that sometimes that go energy, whether that's a program, funding, or whatnot, is really permission. It's the permission to get started on something, because oftentimes we have a hard time giving ourselves permission to get started, and it takes, sometimes some people who believe in you to say, yeah, why not start that crazy awesome thing that we want to see in the world, and getting started from there. So yeah, that go energy is so important.
Okay. So we the permission to go and start things doesn't require capital, right? So that's the message for anyone who's thinking about building in deep tech or hard tech, that think from first principles. Like, you probably don't need enough money to build that first prototype to show traction. Do you have any memories of a founder, starting with or getting very creative with like building their first prototype, right? Any stories that you can think of?
Sure, we have a company right now. I can't say too many details. They're called Lumint. They're here in the Bay Area, and when I talked to the founder, they're working on hydrogen storage. And When I talk to the founder, one of the things, a new attribute, we're always thinking about our lexicon of what are the traits we're looking for in founders, and a new one we're coming up with we're calling alchemy. It's this idea of, can someone take resources, time, money, human power, and turn that into something else? And can they even stretch that in a way that you might not think is possible? And when I talk to the team at Lumint, they're often talking about, oh yeah, we went to the junkyard today, and we got this part out of this machine because this is going to help us drive this forward. And no one knows that this part in this machine is that valuable. And it's stories like that that I just absolutely love. Seeing our founders really do magic with resources. It's incredible.
That's what we love to see. Tim, can you remember any stories from?
Well, a long time ago, Adobe, I didn't fund it, but Adobe raised $100,000, and that was all they ever raised. And now they're worth $100 billion. And I remember a Draper University grad started a company called Pretty Litter.
Yes.
And Pretty Litter was, what their deep tech was, when the cat pees in the litter box, it turns a different color if the cat's sick. And then they figured out a delivery technique. They took $50,000, and I'm not at liberty to say, but it was a big number that they sold Pretty Litter for, and now it's all
allegedly
over the TV
$1 billion.
ads. It's all over the TV ads today. Yeah. So, and that was a Draper University grad. She had that was all they took, $50,000. Boom, magic.
I'll come back to other sources of funding. Danielle, you mentioned non-dilutive funding is available for anyone who's not thought about it. There are a lot of founders who don't even think about it. And I can understand sort of where they're coming from. So Tim, you might remember we had this conversation about a company. Sometimes government funding derails you. It takes your focus off of what you set out to do. So we'd just like to get your thoughts on what are the other sources available, how you should go about it, and how you should make it a part of your roadmap so you don't get distracted.
Yeah, a couple of non-dilutive funding sources I love are the NSF I-Corps program. It offers, I think, a small amount of capital, but they really push founders to get out there and do customer discovery in that program, which I think is extremely beneficial. And what we're also seeing in deep tech now is that the bar is getting higher, where it's not just enough to have scientific milestones anymore. You also have to be having those customer conversations and starting to get into those pilots sooner rather than later, even in deep tech companies. Another program that we really love to see are when founders apply for SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research grants that are put out by the US government. Those have been extremely validating and actually, I wouldn't say simple to apply for, but straightforward to apply to for founders.
They do sometimes get derailed because it's interesting when I come up with an idea for a business and then I try to push that idea on an entrepreneur to go start it and then I want to fund it. It usually doesn't work. And I think that's the same with a lot of the government agencies. They have these ideas of what they're looking for, and usually it's tied to defense or energy or whatever. And they think that this is the answer because that's what they've heard was the answer. But the entrepreneur comes and says, I've got an answer that totally circumvents what you are trying to achieve here, and it's going to be much better, much cheaper, much faster. Sometimes it's hard for the government organization to understand that and to allow the entrepreneur to kind of tweak it a little. So a little flexibility in government grants would be a really good idea because they always think they have the answer, and it's like a better buggy whip when somebody's coming up with a new horseless carriage. I think they've just got to start thinking of those grants as like, hey, we generally want this to happen, so any way you're trying to make it happen would be better. So like an X Prize kind of feeling instead of here's a grant and it has to go down this rat hole. And that's why entrepreneurs do have trouble. Sometimes they go, oh, well, the government wants me to do this. even though I know my business is going to go this way.
Yeah. No, I think we're almost out of time. So last question, I'll take 10 seconds to answer. What do you guys think about hype cycles and cultural movements? These days it's defense.
Gosh.
Or the Gundo, or EEC.
Gosh, well, I mean, I love anything that pushes progress and technology forward. And if a hype, I'm very here for the hype cycle of, deep tech becoming a mainstay thing. Back in the old Teal Fellowship days, there was an old Teal Fellow who wanted to have billboards all over San Francisco that said "Stop building bullshit," and I thought that would be pretty amazing. So yeah, I'm down for the deep tech hype cycle all the way.
Tim?
That's great. Well, so I think I created this curve, and I'll draw it on the wall here.
Okay.
It's a hype cycle. It goes up. It goes up like this to a dot, like an I, a little I. Then it comes down like this, and then it goes up like this in an S form. And that's most industries when they get invented and whatever. And the hype cycle is, whoa, imagine what we can do with the internet or with Bitcoin or with whatever. And then it comes down because people go, well, the internet's not doing all my thinking for me yet, or now I'm not going to put my credit card on the internet or whatever. And then it goes down, and then there's this time while engineers and entrepreneurs are driving, working, and then all of a sudden the promise is fulfilled, and then it's accelerated way past the promise of the top of the hype. So if we're talking about deep tech and there's a little bit of a hype thing, it goes up to that little dot on the I, it'll come back down. People will be going, oh, none of that really cool military stuff happened. None of those cool transportation things happened. They didn't cure cancer yet. They didn't whatever. And then all of a sudden, it comes rising back, comes way back in a crazy way beyond what we ever anticipated. And then they're curing death and they're doing all sorts of things. So that's the IS curve that I invented.
All right, everybody, give it up for Tim and Danielle.